Now, if we look at the different types of dividends, most people just think of the regular cash dividend. That's the most common. Okay, so a regular dividend is like Exxon or Coca-Cola. They would just pay a regular amount in cash. It's usually quarterly. And the general goal for this is the dividend amount that is going to be paid should be stable or growing. Okay, so you don't want to do a dividend cut, because if you cut dividends, the share price usually goes down quite a bit. Not necessarily because of the dividend cut, but because of the signal it sends. What it sends is that a message that the management no longer believes that the share price is going to keep going up or the income is going to keep going up. So people start selling the shares. The opposite is true as well. If they grow the dividend, if it increases it, share price usually goes up quite a bit because it's a positive signal. Management thinks share price is going to continue to grow. Okay, so that's the most common type. The special dividend is another type. This is also cash. Okay, and generally it's a one-time event. Okay, so it's not paid regularly. It's usually when a company has a situation where they've accumulated a lot of cash, it's just been growing, they haven't made investments just because the right thing hasn't popped up, and they may choose to pay a large amount out as a one-time dividend for shareholders. Okay. And the third type is liquidating dividend. And this is also a distribution of cash. Usually comes when they are selling assets, maybe a division of a company or machines, and the proceeds are used to pay a dividend. So that's not a great sign, but it's better than if they kept an unprofitable division continuing to go, or made the investments in bad projects instead. So it's not ideal. It's not very common either, but it's better than any of those scenarios. Now let's look at the timeline of dividends. So I'll go over the key dates. The first date is called the declaration date. The end date is the payment date. And then there's something called a record date and an ex-dividend date. Now this one is a little confusing because of the textbook that you use, and I'll explain it. So I'm going to do this on something called a T+2 settlement. Okay, and this is what the textbook uses. Okay, and what that says is, if you buy a stock today, you won't actually own it today. It takes 2 business days for that stock to be in your account. Okay, and we'll see why this comes into play. And I'm going to put some dates here just to make it relevant. Okay, so January 15th is the declaration date. February 16th is the payment date. And I'll say Friday, January 30th is a record date. And the ex-dividend date will be Thursday, January 29th. So let's go through what each of these are. Declaration date is sort of like what it sounds. It's when it's declared. Okay, and this is when the board declares the dividend. Okay, now a company, even if it's been paying for years and years, they don't have to pay next quarter. Every year it's an option. Now there'll be negative consequences if they didn't pay, but if they chose not to pay, they don't have to. So each quarter they have to formally declare the dividend. And this is when it becomes a legal liability. So once you've declared it, you got to pay it. And The payment date is an easy one. That's the last date. That's when this cash is paid. And that is not actually that important a date. It's important to the investor, but it's more important is the record date, because that determines who gets the dividend. What this says is you must own shares on this date to get the dividend. And when do you own them? At the end of the day. So at the end of the day, the shares must be in your account. So in this example, January 30th, even though it's paid on February 16th, it's paid to anybody who owned it on January 30th. So what if you bought it on January 30th? Do you get it? No, because of this T+2 settlement. It takes 2 days to settle. If you buy it on a certain date, it's going to take 2 days to settle. So when would you need to buy the shares in order to get them in your account on January 30th? It'd be 2 days before. So anybody who owned it on January 28th would get the dividend because they would receive the shares on the 30th. If you bought it on January 29th, you would not get the dividend because it would close on January 31st, which is a Saturday, so not really. It'll go the following Monday. So anyone on January 29th who's buying the shares is not getting the dividend, and that's why it's called the ex-dividend date. Okay. And it's this is the date that the share price falls. Okay. And this is where it gets tricky. And when is that? It is if we are using T+2 settlement, which in Canada was the case, then it is 1 business day before record date. So in our example, if I go back up here, our record date is Friday, January 30th. 1 business day before will be Thursday, January 29th. If that was like a Monday, you have to exclude the Saturday and Sunday. And this is what the textbook uses. This is the version that we have, and also all the old exams. However, current reality is T+1 is the real settlement period. And on this case, it's simple. This ex-dividend date is the same as the record date. So if you get a question, just read and see which of the 2 assumptions are they stating, and that'll tell you when the ex-dividend date is, and that's the date that the share price will fall.